Hello, I'm Dave.
And I'm Rob.
And this is the latest instalment of the Doctor Who show's Alternate Galaxies, where we are back for the third time to talk about Star Trek Picard, particularly Season 3. Rob, how are you?
Dave, very well. Third time back and final time, they tell us.
So they tell us, but we will, I'm sure, touch on whether that means it is the really, really final time later on. This is, of course, Alternate Galaxies, where we talk about shows, films, things that are within the Doctor Who genre, zeitgeist, kind of adjacent to, or really just stuff that we like and want to talk about that isn't Doctor Who.
The kind of stuff we tweet about and Doctor Who fans get more excited about than Doctor Who sometimes.
Sometimes.
So,
look, we'll dive straight into it, Rob. We have discussed Seasons 1 and 2 of Picard when they came out on Alternate Galaxies. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll just say, as usual, we will have a bit of spoiler-free discussion, and then we will lower very clearly the spoiler curtain. So if you don't want to be spoiled, and trust me, you will be spoiled if you stick around after that, please do leave at the spoiler curtain. But before we get to the spoiler curtain, before we drop spoilers, Rob, we've discussed Season 1 of Picard, we discussed Season 2 of Picard when they came out. We're now discussing Season 3. When you went into it, as a viewer, a long-time viewer of the show, what were your expectations?
Well, I've been very scientific about this, Dave, because I've pulled up a tweet from the Doctor Who show account that I made on February 17th this year, and the show had just launched, obviously, on February 16th, that being US time, so this is as the show was launching, and I tweeted, I haven't dipped into Picard Season 3 yet. I see it sitting there, waiting. I've been broadly hopeful about this third season being what they should have done all along, and thus far have seen comments from 2 reviewers I truly rate. One loathes it, one thinks it's really good. End tweet.
I remember you sending that tweet, and I was in a similar position. Going back, I remember Season 1, I did watch. My watching was interrupted because I went overseas halfway through it, and I do remember it took me a while to get back to it because I wasn't that excited by it. Some of the episodes were good, but some of them were a real slog. Mm-hmm. Season 2 started off very well. It was interesting. John Delancey was back as Q. We had a nice little bunch of Easter eggs dropped. The Stargazer. Those skulls were really cool. We had an alternate evil timeline, which is always good. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of got a bit weird, and then it got really weird. And by the end of it, I was just like Luvakin, the Keeper of Traken. I don't know what's going on. And that was really how I felt about Season 2. So I went into Season 3 knowing it was going to have most of the original TNG cast back. Mm-hmm. Now, we didn't know whether that meant they were all back for every episode, or every episode, randomly, one of them would just happen to pop by to give their old friend Jean-Luc a hand. So, that made it sort of interesting. I was very nervous going in, I have to say. Very, very nervous.
Yeah, look, just on that, I seem to recall that we knew very, very early that this third season would be with the Next Gen cast. Did we know as soon as the second season ended, or maybe even before it ended, Dave?
It was either as or just after the last episode of Season 2 dropped.
Yeah.
They dropped that trailer with all the names of who was coming back.
Yeah, because I have this memory of thinking, oh yeah, they know this second season's been a stinker, and so they're reassuring everyone right away, don't panic, the cavalry will be here next season.
In fact, it must have been just before the last episode of Season 2 dropped, because I remember seeing the list of names, thinking it was a great shame that Will Wheaton didn't get to come back to Picard, and then he had his surprise cameo appearance in the next episode.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I thought it could have been the case, and I thought that was very strange to start spruiking the next season before the current one had ended. So look, all told, I was excited that a new season was coming and thinking, I think they're going in the right direction at last. They got the old crew on board. But going back to that tweet, I was still somewhat reluctant to start watching. I was saying, look, it's sitting there. I can see it. Do I press play or not?
So that's where you were 10 weeks ago. Where are you now?
Well, my overall thoughts on the season, spoiler-free as always, Dave, I think it did very well. Look, I do have some beefs with the series, which we'll get to, but I'm happy to say that after thinking those first 2 seasons were a bit rubbish, and coming to dislike them even more as time went on. You know, it's not like Doctor Who where you sort of watch it a bit later and you think, oh, that wasn't so bad. I've actually come to dislike it more as time has gone on. I think the first episode of this third season had aired and I was already out there on the front foot saying, yes, I think they've got this right. The tone is good. It looks good. Somehow it feels more right than the first two seasons did, because they felt dark and depressing and not like Star Trek. And while this one does go to some dark places too and is in that action-adventure vein of the Star Trek movies, which a lot of people instantly say, oh, that's not Star Trek. Although it's in that vein, somehow it just felt more on the right course from the start for me.
I enjoyed this season for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
The problems that I had with this season are in some ways not this season or even this show's fault. And I'll explain what I mean about that as we get into a more detailed discussion. Look, I'm going to preface everything I say for the rest of this episode, and indeed everything I say when we come back shortly for our Season 3 of The Mandalorian chat. In both cases, I enjoyed the shows more than enough that even with the occasional faults and a bit of nitpicking, and there's going to be that, don't worry, it's definitely going to be that. But in both cases, I knew what day they were dropping. I knew that Wednesday was Mando Day, and I knew that Friday was Picard Day. And I was excited to get home and put them on and watch them and then talk with my friends. You know, in the case of the Mando, it was a bit more in real life. In the case of Picard, it was a bit more online. But to get out there and watch them and then talk to friends about them. They were not event television, but it was a series that I did look forward to getting home on Friday night or Saturday morning, and I need to see the new Picard. So for any negatives I have over the next little while, and there will be negatives, I did enjoy it. I did tune in week to week and I was excited by it.
So you're saying you weren't hate watching?
I definitely wasn't hate watching,
right.
And I was definitely far more enthusiastic as the season went on, which is the reverse of seasons 1 and 2, where they started with sort of exciting highs and then just sort of drifted off into what? You know, where you know, I mean, even the first season sort of ended with giant robot octopuses coming out of giant space holes with giant flowers and robots that were from a parallel dimension linked to the Romulans somehow. You know, it
was all there.
You know, it was a lot of TV show. So yeah, look, I enjoyed it. I have problems. Some of the problems weren't its fault, and I think the last point I'll just make before we go to the spoiler curtain is a bit of one that's tangential to what you just spoke about before, Rob, and that is this problem that there really have been two Picards. And a number of people have spoken about this. The guys over at Red Letter Media did a whole big bit on this that sort of tuned in with my views as well. Now, when the original Star Trek went from TV to movies, Captain Kirk was kind of ready-made to be a movie hero. He was your classic Western action hero. A few quips, gets the girl. Like, he's what you want in your movie hero.
Yeah.
Captain Picard was not. Captain Picard was brilliant and perfect and well-made for television. And tuning in every week and seeing what thoughtful, interesting problem Picard would solve in an intellectual way with some action beats thrown in along the way. And you know, Riker was there to get the girl, and Data was there for some comedy, and Worf was there for some liners, you know, and Deanna Troi was there for the blokes, let's face it, that's her only purpose, which is, you know, sad, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, because it hasn't got much better.
We've got to talk about where her accent's gone too, but anyway.
Yeah, the original accent last heard in generations, yes. But the point is, when they got to do the movie, that Picard is not an action movie hero. And you watch the Picard of the movies, particularly by the time you get to First Contact, and it's a great fun movie. It's nothing to do with Star Trek The Next Generation, and it's a completely different Picard. This is a Picard who gets shouty, who likes to run around with guns, who swings Tarzan style across the Enterprise, you know, gets the girl. You know, they made a change in the character to say this needs to work in the movies. And I think one of the problems with the series going right back to the first one is they never quite worked out which Picard was turning up in this show and whether this show was a continuation of the movies or a continuation of the TV series until this season, where I think Terry Matalas, as the showrunner for this season, almost just said, I'm going to ignore everything that happened after All Good Things, including season 1 and 2 of this series.
Yep.
And I'm just going to do my own thing as though the movies and the first 2 seasons of Picard and everything else never happened.
I think that's very fair comment, Dave. Yep.
On that note, is it spoiler time?
Spoiler time.
Rob, do you want to kick us off with the spoiler talk? And I guess, did it all work?
Did it all work? Well, I think we've got to rewind a bit, Dave, to what the premise of the series was. And the arc, the story, I guess. I mean, what do we take the arc to be of this season? Jack Crusher, he's got a secret. He also happens to be Picard's son, but that isn't the secret. Changelings are going to destroy Starfleet from within, and sitting behind it all, dun dun dun, the Borg, who Jack has a link to, of course, because Picard, we learn, has now been changed, I guess, at a physical sort of level, not just a mechanical level, but somehow they've got into his DNA because he's passed it on to Jack, this ability to communicate with the Borg. Is that a fair summary of the plot, Dave? Have I done it justice?
Look, I think you have done it justice. If we're asking the question, did the whole series hang together? The answer is yes. Certainly a lot better than last season, where by the end of it, just Q's doing stuff because why?
Yeah.
Yeah, just weird stuff. Everything kind of hung together with maybe one big exception I will talk about. Did it need to be 10 episodes? I think that's a bit of a contention. And one of the big things that did detract from me in this season, and that I fully admit is not the fault of Picard Season 3, is that I'm a bit tired of some of this season-long story format. Whatever the TV show it is, I'm kind of a little bit tired of it, particularly in those early episodes where it really felt very manufactured and very cynical in the way that they would drop just enough per episode to get Twitter sort of going, what's going on here? Oh, who's Raffi's handler? Rather than just, okay, we're going to introduce Worf now because this is actually when Worf's part of the plot starts. We're going to not introduce Worf and drop some clues so everyone's going, where's Worf? Who's that? I think it's Worf. Twitter, hashtag Worf is trending. And then Worf rocks up a little bit later because that's now into the second episode. And look, I get the need for cliffhangers. I'm a Doctor Who fan. Of course I get the need for cliffhangers. But there was a lot in this series that occasionally annoyed me because they just pushed things out that didn't need to be pushed out. They just dropped hints that were just ran a little bit too long. And I like the idea of seeding plot. And there was some good stuff there, but I don't think that the series was very even in the way that it distributed that plot. What that meant was those first couple of episodes I was very cynical about, and I was very sort of, okay, well, we're just doing lots of very slow setup. There's no actual story to these episodes. You watch something like The Mandalorian, even season 3 of The Mandalorian, and even though there is an overall story, although less so with that season, we'll talk about that next week.
Yes, we will.
But every time you watch an episode of The Mandalorian, there is some sort of self-contained story with a start, a middle, and an end. And whether you enjoyed the arc stuff or not, there was a contained story. And it might have been a good one or a bad one, but you knew that you'd watched a story. The first few episodes of Picard particularly, it was like I'd watched a 3 or 4 hour movie, and at the 50-minute mark, someone had just pressed pause.
Yeah.
There was no story. And that to me is, look, I get it, it's valid, it's trendy, it's TV at the moment, but I'm frustrated with it. And the unfortunate problem for Picard 3 is this was just sitting here. It was the straw that broke my back in that sense.
Yeah, look, that's fair, because I think this season was about 2 episodes too flabby. And by that, I don't mean you can just go in and surgically remove 2 episodes and it would be okay. You'd have to remove the plot of those 2 episodes and then redistribute the story across the remaining 8. I think it was probably a good 8-part series lurking in those 10 episodes. And look, I thought it was a decent premise. To go back to the story, a number of people would say, oh, this is riffing hard on the Wrath of Khan. And every week that would just get louder. And I guess it was there in the way in Wrath of Khan, Khan wants the Genesis device. Here, Vadic wants Jack. There's a standoff between the 2 ships in various ways.
Nebula.
Ships. I was about to say ships hiding in clouds, but nebula's a better way to put it. Yeah, ships hiding in nebulas. There are infiltrators in Wrath of Khan because they get those eels put inside their heads and, they infiltrate. Here, the changelings are the infiltrators and so on and so forth. I get all of that. But there's plenty in here that wasn't Wrath of Khan either. So to people who would say that, I'd say, look, I hear you. and hey, if it's going to riff on some older Star Trek, Wrath of Khan's a pretty good place to start. But there was a lot more to it as well, and to just handwave and say, meh, it's Wrath of Khan, I think misses the point, which I did see a lot of when it came to this season.
Yeah, look, I think it's very clear that Terry Matalas has obviously seen Wrath of Khan and likes Wrath of Khan. I think that's very clear. And look, I think there were some Wrath of Khan Easter eggs sprinkled through it. I don't think that it was a lot more beyond that. And certainly by the time we sort of got to phase 3 of the season, I think that was well and truly gone. That was more of a Vadic thing than anything else. Look, for me, the highlight in some ways of the season was the Changelings, which, as you know, Rob, DS9 is a show I'm a big fan of. It is, I won't say comfortably my favourite Trek, because Next Generation is up there as well, but it is my favourite Star Trek. And so when they started to reveal that, hey, Changelings were involved, that was something that did pique my interest and did draw me back in a little bit, particularly after those first 3 episodes, which were, look, I still think very shallow and very more miss than hit. Although I did like the twist that the spatial anomaly was just a giant pregnant alien. I thought that was kind of very Trekky and very cool. So that was a positive, but it was that, hey, that's a changeling that brought me back into that. It's therefore a shame that the changelings weren't the big bad, and I think that phase 2 of the season was my favourite. And then we got to phase 3, which had some highlights and some problems. But before I go there, how did the changelings work for you? And I guess I'll start by saying, were you a big DS9 fan, and did you know much of the backstory?
No, I'm not a DS9 fan.
Okay.
By which I'm not saying, oh, I hate DS9. I'm just saying it's actually the Star Trek I've seen the least of.
Wow, okay.
It was one that I kind of... I looking back, I don't know whether it was because I was a Babylon 5 kind of guy, and I was like, they've ripped off Babylon 5, There's debate still raging about that today, folks. I don't know whether it was because of that or not, but I've not actually seen a lot of it. So, for me, look, I know where these characters, have come from. I know a bit of what happens in DS9, but for me, it would have nowhere near the same effect as it would have on you. But I know enough to know that this is an alien species that could carry the season for fans, but I'm not sure it could for the normies, and I think that's why they have to bring in the Borg at the end. Look,
it's absolutely right. I think that in a rational sense, what you said is very, very true, and we'll talk about the Borg in a moment because we need to have that conversation. But I did like that the changelings were back. I thought for a while they were used very well. There was one episode there that really reminded me of The Adversary, which is a really good classic episode of DS9. I thought that the danger of the changelings was shown very well. They seemed to be powerful and difficult to defeat, and that tension, if they could be anyone, was really well captured. I did think that they were disposed of a little bit too easily, and look, that was excused because they weren't real changelings. They were these experimented upon offshoot hybrid things. They weren't part of the Great Link, and that allowed them to be a bit more flexible. But in DS9, when a changeling was killed, it was a very big deal. It only happened a couple of times in the series, and it was like, oh wow, you killed a changeling. That's huge.
Oh really?
Yeah, they were very hard to kill, and it was a big deal when they were killed. It was sort of an event, if you like. It's kind of like killing a Vorlon, if you like, for Babylon 5 fans.
Oh wow, okay, that's big.
Yeah, different, but that's sort of, when it happens, it's like, wow, that's been a big deal, and there are ramifications each time in the episode, at least, if not in the series. So the fact that they could just sort of be blasted, I thought was a little bit of a shame, but look, that's fine. But look, it was enough to get my interest elevated, and we started to get some really good, fun episodes in there, and I'll talk as well about some other great stuff that came in there when we talk about characters. We then had sort of the big build-up to the big cliffhanger of what's going on with Jack, what's behind the red door. Okay, he's about to open the door, cliffhanger. And then we were going into the big sort of 2-part finale of the season. Now, I'll be honest with you, Rob. My first reaction on seeing a Borg cube behind that door at the start of episode 9 was, not the Borg again. Yeah. But as I was saying at the start, that's not this season's fault. It is, as you were saying, absolutely the right choice for the big bad of the final season of the final show of Jean-Luc Picard to be the Borg. I get that. It's not Season 3's fault that the Borg cubes and Borg stuff rocked up in Season 1. It's not Season 3's fault that in Season 2 they threw the Borg in to do some weird Borg and just be weird for no particular reason, and then we're going to reinvent the Borg, and then, the Borg are all nice now because, I don't know, like it's not Season 3 fault, and Season 3 clearly just forgot that all of Season 2 happened.
Well, Dave, Beverly had the line, "We've not seen the Borg for 10 years."
Yes, to which Picard didn't go, actually, one of my best friends, although she's not that close a friend because she's a cold-hearted murderer, but we don't talk about that. Yeah. One of my friends on my previous ship turned into a Borg queen, and now the Borg are nice, and we have, diplomatic relations with the Borg. No, we haven't seen the Borg, never mentioned them, Season 2 didn't happen.
Yeah, I appreciated that on one level very much, but on another, I thought, that's so weird. That's a really weird thing to do. They're doing that deliberately, surely.
Nobody in the team could surely have missed that.
No, that's what I mean.
So yeah, as I say, it's not Season 3's fault that the Borg have been badly used for the last 2 seasons, and that led to a little bit of cynicism on my part. It was the right choice to make.
Yeah, agree.
Now, were you a Voyager fan, Rob?
I was a Voyager fan. I never got through the whole thing, and I'm actually about to remedy that. I'm buying the DVDs. They're so cheap these days.
Oh,
and
okay.
I'm going to remedy that. But I've seen about 4 of the 7 seasons, so I know a bit about it.
And have you seen Endgame?
I don't know what happens in Endgame, but I may have seen it. I don't know them by their episode
It's the series finale.
Oh, then no, I haven't.
Oh, okay. So you wouldn't have picked up all the links to the end of Voyager then?
No, fill me in.
Oh, okay. So the cube the Borg cube that they find, and the Borg queen that's sort of decaying and having to cannibalize all the Borg, is, as I understand it, the cube and the queen that Janeway killed and destroyed to make their escape at the end of Season 7 of Voyager to get back to Earth.
Oh, very nice. Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. That's going to tie together nicely when I watch that show again.
Yeah, so again, really clever links and sort of bringing all of Trek together. I thought the final confrontation was really good. I thought that way that they did the Borg Queen as that sort of desperate thing was really cool. I thought there were some other problems that we'll talk about, but having got past my, oh no, it's the Borg again, they did use them well.
Yeah, look, I do think the Borg are a bit overdone. It's come to define Picard's life, but I guess that's the point. I suppose it is probably the biggest thing that ever happened to him in his life in a very colourful career. But yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And just from a meta point of view, most people would agree that whether they're their personal favourites, Q, Who, and Best of Both Worlds, are absolute classic episodes, not just of TNG, but of Trek. Whether First Contact is your favourite TNG movie, it is comfortably the most successful and comfortably the most popular, certainly with the general public. And it is a lot of Star Trek fans' favourite Trek movie or favourite Next Gen movie. It's not mine, but it is for a lot of people. So when they do the Borg well, they are a big deal. I get the temptation. And again, we're Doctor Who fans. We know about the Daleks being brought back, not always in the best way.
Yeah, precisely.
So let's talk about the Federation and Frontier Day, and oh my god, how stupid are the Federation?
Yeah, haven't they seen Battlestar Galactica?
Or read Dark Force Rising, or any occasion when you slave ships together, it works out really, really, really badly.
Yeah.
And I didn't get what they were kind of going for. It was, of all of the plot conceits in this, and it's sci-fi, it's fantasy, you're allowed plot conceits. Of all the plot conceits in this, the entire Federation fleet is just going to be hanging around Earth on this day because they're going to fly past in space where no one can see them. That was kind of that was very bizarre, very stupid. I kind of liked that Commander Shelby was back as Admiral Shelby, commanding the Enterprise F, I think it was.
F4G, maybe?
F4G, something like that. And then she got shot for her troubles for making a really bad decision. That was kind of amusing. And it was a nice moment of, hey, they've got Shelby back. That's cool. I certainly wasn't expecting that. Mm-hmm. That part of the plot, though, was bonkers, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, look, absolutely. And I made the joke about Battlestar Galactica a moment ago. I'm just going, this is the whole mini-series of Battlestar Galactica that kicked off the reboot. This is the whole plot of that. Are they really riffing on that and thinking sci-fi fans won't notice?
Yeah, look, that was a little bit weak. But look, the next note I have, Rob, is simply Enterprise D. Would you like to lead us in that discussion?
Once we knew that there was this space museum with ships in it, I just turned to my wife instantly and said, oh, they're going to get the Enterprise back. So you sort of saw it coming a mile off. And what a beautifully reconstructed set. Is that what you're wanting to talk about, how it looks?
Well, that and the whole plot of the TNG crew back on the Galaxy-class Enterprise zooming around the galaxy.
Sure.
Which basically was just the last 2 episodes.
Yeah. Well, look, I'll go with how it looks first. They recreated that beautifully, and that is a beautiful design of ship. We were talking about that just recently, weren't we, Dave, on Twitter? And I was saying that whole loop behind the main seats, that's wood. And you had comments on how the ship, where it falls in Star Trek history, it's because it's more of a peaceful ship. That's why they got the plush pile, shag carpet, and the wooden bits. And it's not a warship.
No, it's interesting talking both in universe and outside of universe. Outside of universe, they really had this thing that they wanted the technology in TNG to be, quote, technology unchained, and this idea that humanity has now got to a point of technology where it's not just, we're putting together, we're at the edge of what we can do to try and explore the galaxy. It's like, no, we're now so far advanced that we can basically fly around in giant flying hotels. But the in-universe explanation, to my mind, is, look, the Klingons are now our allies, the Romulans are peaceful, every adversary we've encountered for the last few decades, they're no match for us, we're kind of friends with everybody, the universe is safe, we've got great big scary phases, so we can just cruise around in big luxury liners with our families, with kids on board. Yeah. With carpets and with lighting and with kindergartens and science stations and sort of all be very genial and very relaxed and just explore the galaxy in luxury. And then obviously we get the Borg, then we get the Dominion, and suddenly they go, actually, no, the galaxy is a very scary place, and outside of our little bit of it is a lot of very scary stuff. So that's why, even with the Enterprise E, it was smaller, darker, leaner. There weren't families on board, and I think you sort of see that continuing. So, the Galaxy class was kind of the last safe moment, that sort of Indian summer before World War II, if you like.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And look, I think there was even a joke about the carpet. Wasn't there a line I missed the carpet or something?
There was. It was very fun.
Yeah. Look, in terms of the next gen crew, it was great to see everyone back. I mean, finally, Brent Spiner can look like himself and still play Data and doesn't have to be shoehorned into other roles like relatives of Nooney and Sung, who he seems to keep playing in Picard seasons 1 and 2.
And sorry, once again, it's not season 3's fault that they've overused Brent Spiner in seasons 1 and 2.
It was like they just couldn't work out how to have a convincing older Data in those first 2 seasons. Very strange. Frakes, always good as Riker. I thought it was interesting that they'd shoehorned in that he and Troi were on some kind of break from one another. They were separated. That didn't feel quite right to me. That was near levels of Luke Skywalker has lost all hope in the universe and gone to die as a hermit in The Last Jedi. It just didn't feel right for either character based on everything we know about them, or at least everything I know about them with my level of Star Trek knowledge. It really didn't need to be there, even as a payoff at the end of the season, like, oh, we've survived and we're back in love, la-di-da. I just didn't need that. I felt that was strange, did you?
Yeah, I think that they assumed we'd invested in some of the backstory they'd given us in season 2 more than we had, because they did mention Tom Riker's death in season 2, but I don't think we were sort of really invested in the death of a character we'd never met a season ago. No. So it didn't quite work. As much as I loved seeing LeVar Burton back, I didn't quite buy the idea that great big excited extrovert space engineer Geordi is now just like running a museum.
Yeah.
that and making sure his daughters are home before night, like that just didn't quite ring true for me. But I get that he had to be there because, as you say, we had to have the museum. And look, side note, when we did introduce the museum and they had all the different starships, and there was sort of one for every different Trek fan. So some fans saw the Voyager and teared up, and I saw the Defiant and got emotional, and others saw the Constitution class Enterprise, and they're all there. So that was lovely. Was the TNG crew flying around on a Galaxy-class Enterprise the ultimate in fan service Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did I care on this occasion? No, I didn't. I think it was just done very, very tastefully, and there was just enough of it. It didn't outstay its welcome. It was fun. It was nice. It was really well done. I think that restoring the saucer section of the Enterprise that was crashed on Viridian 3 was a little bit improbable, but
yeah,
sure.
A bit of a stretch.
A bit of a stretch, especially since apparently just Geordi, in his spare time, just going, I'm sort of imagining him going up to, great big hole rips in the hull. Oh, that'll buff out.
Yeah, it's not exactly like repairing a Ford Falcon in the garage. It's a huge thing.
No, but look, it was fun. It was lovingly done. It made sense. They covered it all with a line. So yeah, it was a lovely moment. I didn't tear up like a lot of fans are saying on Twitter. Maybe that's just me, but it was good.
Yeah. Well, look, slightly moving on from the Next Gen cast, but not really because he's still part of it. He is the titular character. I think Patrick Stewart really leaned into having the ensemble back together here. You see it in his performance. He's not just playing the role like, oh, I'm a retired old admiral and you people don't need to be here, but I'm grateful that you are. I think he's also playing it at another level. I don't know whether you'd call this a meta level or just another level. Like, these are people who 30 plus years ago I saw week in, week out for most of the year after year after year, and I love them, and his performance feels very real because of that. And I think it's quite interesting. I've sent you an interview, Dave. I'm not sure if you watched it with Jonathan Frakes.
Not yet, no.
And he talks very specifically about when the show was coming back. Patrick Stewart had them all over, well, I say all, but most of the main cast over to his house for tea to tell them, I'm bringing the show back, but you guys aren't going to be in it. And that was obviously something he was very keen on at first, but I think it was way better doing it like this and having the old gang back. But when we get towards the end of this episode, I do have some stuff to say about that too. I'll pause there for the moment.
Look, I agree with you. I think one of the interesting things about Season 3 is that although Picard was important in terms of a lot of the relationships on the show, whether it's him and Beverly, him and Jack, him and the crew, him and Raffi, etc., he actually wasn't that important to the plot. And apart from him talking Jack down at the very, very end, most of the solutions to this episode didn't come from Picard.
Good point.
So he was able to take a step back. Now, look, before we dive into a number of characters we want to talk about, are there any other general points from you?
Yeah, look, this sort of ties into something we've already spoken about, so I'll throw it in now before we go on. I think it's interesting how Terry Matalas, who you've mentioned came on as showrunner this season, must have came on board and looked at some of the playing pieces on the table from the previous 2 seasons and thought, nah, forget that. We talked about the Borg, of course. But a big one off the top of my head would be Picard's love interest, Laris. I mean, we ended that second season with Picard asking Laris for a second shot. The season started with him rejecting her. Season ended with him saying, give me another shot sort of thing. Yet in this season, she's nowhere to be seen, and I don't think she was even mentioned. Now, I don't know whether that's because it would complicate Picard and Crusher, not that they're having a romance anymore per se, or there was just no way to shoehorn her in. I don't know. So I just thought I'd mention poor old Laris for anyone who was a fan of Laris, Dave.
Fair enough. So look, our run sheet now says we're going to talk about characters that we want to discuss, and we haven't got a particular list together. It's just the ones we have stuff to say about. So I'll kick us off with Jack Crusher and say, first of all, it is super weird that Beverly named her son after her dead husband. That's just weird. I don't care how you explain it in the plot, it is weird.
Oh, really? Even as a homage, to honour him?
I think so. I think grandfather's fine, but your dead husband? And particularly like the kid you've had with your dead husband's best mate?
Well, that starts to get weird. I'll agree with that second part. Yeah,
no,
true.
Fair enough. Look, Jack Crusher, as played by Ed Spillings, was one of the highlights of the series for me. I thought he's a really good actor. He looked great in the Starfleet uniform once he got into it. He had those moments where you didn't quite know where the character's going to jump. Is the character going to jump in the sort of Artful Dodger direction, or is he going to jump in the, you can see the son of Picard coming through type direction? And there was always that tension between them, and that makes for an interesting character to watch. It was just really good. It was really fun. He got to be intricate to the plot. I think they probably dragged some of the what's going on with Jack stuff out a little bit too long, and I'm not quite sure why he saw creeping vines in his vision. I'm not quite sure if we got that, but it all worked. I thought he was a great actor, a great character. I liked him.
I took that to be the interconnectedness of the Borg. I could be completely wrong, but I took that after everything was revealed. I took that to be that things were connected somehow.
Okay, that could make sense.
Yeah, but I really don't know. Dave, I didn't like Jack at first. The personality was rubbing me all kinds of wrong, and as that realization of, oh geez, they're going to make him Picard's son, got louder and stronger in my head, I was thinking, no, don't make this idiot related to Picard. I really wasn't digging him at first. And I think that was by design. As the story went along, I warmed to him, and by the end, I thought Jack was still not maybe 100% likeable all the time, but pretty likeable and very interesting. And that's what you need in characters. You need interest. So, in the end, I think Jack Crusher, fine, great. And if they do make another series, which we may talk about, he may be good in that counselor's chair. I don't know. But at first, I really didn't like him. That's for sure.
Fair enough. A character you want to talk about?
Spoiled for choice. Let's talk about Shaw.
Okay.
Now, I couldn't stand Shaw at first either. And I knew he was being written in a way to make me feel that. What was refreshing, however, is even though he had the expected arc where you just love the guy at the end, he still felt true to the person we first met. And that's something I think a lot of writers stuff up in TV shows. You sometimes have people just suddenly turn 180 degrees without explanation or become really nice on their deathbed. This was much better done, and I joined with the dozens of people I saw online who said they had watched the hell out of a show with Shaw running a starship, but of course by the end it's all about giving Seven the ship, and Raffi's the number one, and Jack's now become Troi, and that's the new team. But I really enjoyed Shaw after a shaky start.
So look, 3 quick points on Shaw from me, because I did kind of expect you were going to bring him up.
Okay.
Look, I will say that I did absolutely get the reference to Shaw from Jaws, and that's what he was named after, and particularly when he was doing his big backstory speech, it was very, very, very clearly a riff on Captain Shaw's speech, famous Indianapolis speech in Jaws, when the Indianapolis went into the water, 807 of us went in that night. When the sharks were done, only 103 came out. I could totally see where that was going. That was very cool. I never really warmed to Shaw as a character. I felt the whole way through he was kind of Captain Plot Device. He was bitchy when he needed to be bitchy. He was helpful when he needed to be helpful. And it never really felt like one consistent character. And particularly that writing, I get that when he was first introduced, they were trying to make us not like the character. And I get that he was reacting in this, well, hang on, who are you two to come and just tell me to change my mission and go off and do... No, that's stupid, no. That, I get that. I didn't think it was very well written. And they just wrote him as a dick rather than as a professional captain who had those views. And I never really quite warmed to him. I get that other people did, but he just felt like his character every week was whatever the plot needed him to be. And therefore, I'm obviously not desperate for him to come back from the dead, but I will make the point, even if I had liked the character, I wouldn't want him to come back from the dead, because as I've said on many of these episodes about Star Wars, I don't like it when characters like Palpatine, like Boba Fett, like Darth Maul are killed off very clearly. You have a death moment, and then, the audience wants them back, so, no, they're alive again. I think that's terrible. That's terrible drama. It's terrible fiction. It's cheap. It's lazy. Star Trek is always about looking to the future, so let's not just bring Shaw back because, hey, people on Twitter love him.
Okay, entirely fair. I love him. Dave?
Look, I'm going to throw in one of the guest characters, and because it was a very important one to me and probably the highlight in some ways of the series, and that is Ro Laren coming back. I was a big fan of Michelle Forbes in the series and indeed in Battlestar Galactica. and a few other things that she's turned up in. Ro Laren was a fantastic character. She was a character that came along with a really, really strong arc. She's in some of my favourite episodes, Ensign Ro, Preemptive Strike, and a few others from seasons 5 and 7. Great character. She was, in some ways, a bit of a turning point for the series, when the series was going from that Gene Roddenberry, everybody gets along and everybody's friendly, no one has a problem in the future, to no, we can actually have characters with a bit of a dark backstory and who make bad decisions sometimes and are coming from a different sort of moral perspective, and that sort of lent into that later TNG and particularly Deep Space Nine. So I could kind of feel the whole of Star Trek twisting around her, and she felt like a breath of fresh air when she came in. And when she came in here, it was just so well done. I was not spoilt by her appearing, so it was a genuine, wow! Oh my God, that's Ro Laren, wow! And there was all the tension, like, is she not a changeling? There was the tension between her and Picard, because if you haven't seen Preemptive Strike, which is her final episode, that departure between her and Picard, where the final episode, I think it's directed by Patrick Stewart, in fact, that final scene of that final episode where he's just angry, and Riker sort of puts the report down the desk and sort of slowly backs out of the office because you can just see Picard is just beyond words angry and betrayed. And they did pick it up and they did pay homage to that in a way that I felt really worked really well. She was then important to the plot. She then got a heroic death. I just thought that was a really great character to bring back, and I loved seeing a favourite of mine back.
Yeah, I had a wild teenage crush on Michelle Forbes, so I was happy as the proverbial pig in muck when she came on, Dave. And it's a shame they killed her off, but then I thought, well, what would be the future for that character in Star Trek going forward? They probably couldn't do much with her, so it was probably a good way to go out.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I have nothing really to add to that. It was more fan service in some ways, but fan service done right, and fan service that felt relatively natural.
Yeah.
How about Vadic? Or Vadic? How do you say it? I've forgotten in the week or two since I stopped watching the show.
I think Vadic.
Vadic! Let's go with Vadic. I think Amanda Plummer was brilliantly unhinged as Vadic, Dave. I think she really leaned into the writing, which was quite solid. It's hard for an actor to really smash a part when the writing's not there. So I think the writing was there. She leans into it, and she just feels unstoppable at first. The ship is awesome. She's got all the changelings out in Starfleet doing their thing. She's got the upper hand. Things looked genuinely grim for a long time. I mean, you know our heroes, or at least some of them, are going to survive because, hey, it's Star Trek and it's Picard. They're not going to kill everyone off, right? But they did look so grim, and she felt like a genuine threat, which is what you want from a villain. So I think an excellent villain for this third season in Vadic. But again, she gets swept away with all the other changelings, and then the Borg takes center stage.
She was certainly a formidable villain, and she was certainly a credible villain, and Amanda Plummer was excellent in the role. I warmed to her more as she went on. I must admit, those first couple of performances were just a little bit too big for my taste, much in the same way as Michelle Gomez's Missy was quite a bit too big for my taste, when she first started. But like Missy, as she went on, we got to see some of those lower moments, and particularly when she came on board the Titan, I thought that was a really strong and creepy performance, and I really enjoyed it. And she got a cool death as well.
Oh, super cool death. If you're a villain going out in a TV show, why wouldn't you want to freeze in space and then shatter into 100 pieces? Like, wow.
Look, the only other character I had something particularly to talk about was Worf. I think Worf's a very interesting character if you look at him across the whole of Trek. In TNG, he's actually pretty terrible at his job. He's always making mistakes. He's always letting things happen that he shouldn't. He's always sort of got a very strange take on stuff. He, randomly kills members of the Klingon High Council because he's in a bad mood with them, despite the fact he's a serving security chief. Like he's kind of terrible, but they very quickly worked out that Michael Dorn has a fantastic comic timing, and yes, they definitely leaned into that, and that's why you start to see a lot of stuff, Worf and Alexander Troi and Worf and Alexander and Worf and Data. They just go off and have a rompy adventure, and he kind of just became the funny character. That said, when they bring him into DS9 and they make him chief of tactics or strategy, whatever it is. He's a really, really good character. I think he suits that darker mood much better, but still that comic timing is there. And I did like the fact that they just completely gave up on Worf being a particularly serious or relevant or useful character, and they just said, let's put Michael Dorn in as many situations where he can have funny one-liners as possible, and let's just go with that. And that's what they did. And look, was it a bit silly? Sure, but why not highlight that part of the character?
Oh, yeah, his one-liners were a delight. And I've always enjoyed Worf, even back in the Next Generation days, so there was no hardship having him back.
Oh, I enjoyed him. I just, particularly when I look back now and sort of rewatch the show, I just go, you are terrible at your job.
Yes. Yes, I can see that.
Anyone else you wanted to talk about?
I've covered all the main ones, like I did the Next Gen crew as a bunch. I don't really have much to say about Seven or Raffi or whatever. I could add on to my bit that I said about Picard. I think in terms of the character of Picard himself, I think in this season, realising he's got a son, realising his life has gone off in some crazy directions, but also realising he has a chance to make things right now, spend some time with this son, save the world again. I just think that was a lot more interesting for his character than that second season's focus in particular on, oh, hey, Picard saw his mentally ill mother hang herself, and he's been affected ever since, which just felt so off for Star Trek.
That happened, didn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that did happen.
So, although there's some big stuff happening in this season, this was so much lighter and just moved along, and it was nothing like that second season, which was just horrible on so many levels, to be honest.
Yeah, it was definitely always fun to watch, and that's why I was always very excited and happy to tune in every Friday or Saturday when I could and watch it. So big credit to that. Look, we've said that the big ending, the big finale was really exciting. It was really fun. It was massive fan service. We didn't care. I would like just to highlight before we go into a couple of final points that I was very pleased that they gave the end of the episode enough room to breathe. Now, it did feel a little bit like The Lord of the Rings with sort of the 14 different endings.
Yep.
But I did think it actually did have enough room to breathe. It had enough room to quietly wrap up the Next Gen team and give them a farewell that was very clearly a very, very clear visual reference to the final scene of All Good Things. And then to sort of wrap up all the little bits of the plot and all the little individual bits of the character. I thought that when they said, we've renamed the Titan in honour of you, it was going to be called the USS Picard.
Right.
Which I think would have been cooler than just another Enterprise, particularly as Shelby's Enterprise was introduced and destroyed in the space of about 40 minutes, which felt like a waste of an Enterprise to me. Now, I am told that there is backstory to that Enterprise in sort of other ephemera.
Oh, okay.
So apparently it is talked about elsewhere, but I did think that was a waste of an Enterprise, and going to a new one was a bit silly, but it was a nice moment. And look, I thought that Q and Jack right at the end was a really, really good moment. And whilst I think that Jack needs an actual job on the new Enterprise, he can't just be the captain's buddy. And in fact, I think it would be interesting to have him go from, I just cruise around with my mum in a spaceship and do what I like, to, dude, you're now an ensign. Your job is over at that console. Go do your job. Yes, I know you're my mate, but you can't just act like it. Like, I think that would be a really interesting thing. But anyway, the point I'm getting to is if you gave me that ship, that crew, on every week we have an adventure type series, I would be so there for it.
Look, so will I, and I'll say that up front. But Dave, if you think of the three personalities of the three people sitting in those three command chairs, aren't they more similar than not? Like, are they all just going to be rebels each week together? Like, is no one going to pull them into line? How does that work?
Yeah, look, that's a good point. I think if they did seriously go down this whole rumoured Star Trek Legacy type series with the new crew of the Enterprise, I guess it is now, not the Titan, you're right, they'd have to introduce some other characters, and there would have to be an antagonist. And you know, whether that's a Spock-like character or, you know, a very nerdy or very by-the-book second officer or science officer or something that can kind of be that antagonist, I think, you know, they'll have to do that. And they would have to give Jack a proper role. I think that goes without saying.
Yeah, I think it's got to come from somewhere, that sort of angle, because Otherwise, they just won't be true to the characters. If suddenly Seven is just suddenly being all by the book, it's like, well, that's not her. What's going on? So I'm already thinking ahead to that. If they even make that season, who knows?
If they even make that season, yep, that's true. Rob, we're going to do highlights and lowlights before you finish. Let's start with your lowlight.
We'll start with the lowlight. Okay.
Yeah, because we'll go out on the high.
Okay. The lowlight for me, Dave, and this is going to be funny given what you've just been talking about, was the final episode.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I can sense the internet has just had a sharp intake of breath as I say that. Even before we got to the end of the episode, Dave, I recall the dialogue felt off in that episode. Exposition was creeping in. They were explaining things we could see on screen. It was suddenly off to me at the very start of the episode. And as it went on, we had all sorts of things happening, and near the end we had the Enterprise flying into the Borg cube like the Millennium Falcon flies into the Death Star in Return of the Jedi. Yes. I was rolling my eyes, and then the very fan service ending, of course. No one dies, and we're playing cards. Direct hat tip to the end of the actual Next Gen series. And part of me was like, yes, okay, very clever. I get it. I understand what you're doing. I've seen that. But I don't really get true satisfaction from that stuff because primarily I think it's cheap. Fan service and member berries is a very cheap way to get someone's interest. And I'll prove it. When you find someone who loves that last episode, what are they raving about the most? I guarantee it's not the actual plot, but it's the feels they had when watching it. Now, having said all of that, there is a place for that kind of thing, but I'll save that comment until we get to our final thoughts on the episode.
No, fair enough. Look, my low light, if I was going for sort of a series-wide low light, it would be the fact that the changelings were brought back to be second fiddle. Mm-hmm. They were kind of the Vardens of this series, and that to me was a bit disappointing. My low light in terms of a moment was it's in, I think, episode 3, where the ship is out of control and it's lost power and it's spiraling towards the great big pregnant alien. And Picard and Riker are just, oh, well, I guess we're dead. Let's just go and make peace with our maker and go and have a drink and sit in the holodeck that always is powered even when there's no power because line.
That's right.
I just thought, that was stupid, but I get it. They were very obviously saving money on the sets because they were going to rebuild the Enterprise. Like, I know that now. But I just thought watching Picard and Riker be, no, well, we've been defeated. There's no way we could ever get power back to this ship. Oh, well, let's just go and have a drink and get ready for death. Was so unlike those characters, and that was a really low moment for me.
That's fair. And do you know what? I had honestly forgotten that happened, and I must have just put it out of my mind. Otherwise, I might have thrown that in myself.
Yeah, and look, I'll lead us off with the highlight, because I have kind of already said it, and it was Ensign Rowe being back as Commander Rowe. It was Michelle Forbes' performance. It was that whole episode. That remains my favourite episode of the series. It was a good episode that did everything right, because it was a story. There was a beginning, a middle, and end of Rowe's story, of Rowe's episode. There was a plot to it. It was tense. It was dynamic, but it did also move the whole arc forward as well. Mm-hmm. And indeed, it did lead into this whole conspiracy that there are changelings infiltrated the top levels of Starfleet that I don't think was ever quite properly dealt with. I mean, yes, they said they were putting all the kids through the transporter to identify who were changelings, but is somebody who's the admiral in charge of security at Starfleet not going to be able to work out a way to get out of that? Yeah. And are there still changelings infiltrating the Federation that we've all forgotten about? I don't know.
Yeah, is it a one-off transporter thing that they do, or is it just in the transporters now? That might be harder to avoid if they have to transport somewhere eventually in their career. I don't know. Yeah.
No, but the fact that we sort of didn't get a really tight explanation just shows that the changelings were the second fiddle to the Borg in this, and we've discussed why, and that's fair enough. Rob, your highlight?
Dave, my highlight would be the show doing what it should have done in the first season, putting the band back together and getting off on the right foot from the start. And although they did it late, it was done well, narratively speaking. At first, it's just Picard and Riker. They get on a ship, Seven's on the ship. Now they've picked up Beverly. Meanwhile, Raffi realises her handler is Worf. Now Troi's involved. Here's Geordi. Here's a new body for Data. And so on. It comes together really well. It's much better than if they were at, say, Picard's birthday party and something went wrong and miraculously the whole team is there already assembled. I would have gone, oh no, don't do it like that. So this was a much better idea. And if you don't think it should have come first in the 3 seasons, like I think this should have absolutely happened in the first season, just think of Star Wars The Force Awakens. It got off on the same wrong foot by not reuniting the old gang, acknowledging them properly, and then moving on. And sadly, because of Rian Johnson killing off Luke in the second movie, Carrie Fisher dies and so on, Star Wars, to its detriment, didn't even get the chance to course correct in its third part. But Picard did, and reunited everyone, and that was great to see. So it is my highlight, what they did.
No, look, that's fantastic. Look, Rob, we need to start wrapping this up because we're getting close to an hour. There's many things we could have discussed. Moriarty, Beverly Crusher, Geordi's kids, Law, why they made the stupid cliche decision to activate Law. Oh, we'll be able to control him. No, we can't. Bulbot will invite Vadic onto the ship to trap her. That always works out. No, it never works out. We could talk about so many things. There isn't time. I will say, though, if you want to go into this stuff in a lot of detail and you do enjoy our hot takes, check out Trek This Out's hot takes of Picard, which they did every week, and I guested on one of those ones. They're a different style to us, but they're lots of fun, and they do go into each episode in a lot of depth. My final thought, Rob, look, to sum up what I've said, I enjoyed watching this series. There were many great characters. There were many great moments. There were some dumb moments. There were some stupid moments. Had this been a standalone season where we hadn't wasted the Borg before and we hadn't used Brent, I should say, and if it wasn't that I was just a bit sick of this sort of drag the arc out over 10 episodes and make sure Twitter's excited everyone, if it wasn't for those things, this would have been perfect. As it was near perfect. It was fun. It's the best Trek that's been in quite a while, with the exception of Strange New Worlds, which I love. Mm-hmm. It was really good. I'm happy. I enjoyed it. And I'm keen for Star Trek Legacy if it happens.
Fantastic. My final thoughts, I may sound like a broken record. I just wish they'd started with this series and then moved on from it. Instead, we killed Picard in the first season, then we had a Star Trek 4 time travel ripoff in the second season, and then suddenly we got on track in this one. And look, I may be shouted down by this in people who were just in tears at the end, and then perhaps up and marching around their lounge room and conducting the Star Trek orchestra as the Next Gen theme sort of played ad infinitum, the same bars over and over and over and over at the end, and they're thinking, wow, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened. All those people are probably saying, what are you talking about? This was the best way to end the series. No, I think this should have been the first season and then gone on to do new things. I do understand why their emotions would be there, though. The show was designed to push all the buttons. If they weren't feeling it, or if anyone out there wasn't feeling it, check your pulse, you're probably dead. Being a brutal bastard, though, who wants the story first and DeFeel's second, I just felt this series was arse about, and that's not Terry Metalis' fault. It's how others kick the series off to set that course from the start.
Fair enough. Well, look, that's been our Alternate Galaxies look at Picard Season 3. We will be back very shortly. We are planning to do an Alternate Galaxies on The Mandalorian Season 3, which has also finished in the last couple of weeks. Now, whether you hear that next or you hear our List Makers episode next, we're not quite sure, but they're both coming down the path very soon, followed obviously by our monthly episode at the end of May.
I also have a very special video coming. Did the Fifth Doctor wear a cricket outfit? I will answer all.
Well, that's going to be a quick 4-second video, yes.
It's currently at 20 minutes, Dave.
Oh my goodness, I wonder what you're going to say there. Interesting. Okay, well look, we'll wait for all that, but until then, I've been Dave.
I've been Rob.
And we'll speak many times very soon.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to Alternate Galaxies, the podcast where Rob and Dave from the Doctor Who show take a look at other great sci-fi and fantasy that we think Doctor Who fans might like. You can reach us at hello@thedwshow.net, on Twitter @thedwshow, or on Facebook /The DW Show. Alternate Galaxies is an irregular podcast, so stay tuned to the Doctor Who show and other programs on our feed to know when the next episode's coming. Our theme music is called Wretched Destroyer and is by Kevin MacLeod. Find him at incompetech.com. Well, that's it for this episode. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye!